Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your host Shuggie, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, Shuggie's body double.
Oh, you're no. You're A, far slimmer and far shorter than I am.
I mean, I was kind of saying it ironically because we look very different, but I feel like that dropped like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
Inglourious Basterds, your pick this week. It was on my list as well. I love this film. I'm so glad that it came up when it did. It is a film that I kind of revisit every now and then because it is just such a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Pitt's Lieutenant Aldo Raine is one of the all-time great kind of... He's such a brilliant comedic character because Brad Pitt's accent is up there with Daniel Craig's like terrible accents that are hilarious. Daniel Craig from Knives Out, if you know what I'm talking about. This is kind of very similar, but there's also kind of a darkness to Pitt's performance that's really intimidating at times, whilst being completely ridiculous.
Yeah, if you're gonna put a character to a Tarantino film, it's someone like that, isn't it? And like the accent was mad, but you don't really question it.
No, it's kind of, you'd say generally you'd go it's terrible, but it's perfect for the film.
Yeah, absolutely. This for me is Brad Pitt's best performance ever. I mean, he has certainly gone up in my estimations since seeing various films like Burn After Reading and stuff. I think that was the first time that you really got to see his comic ability. Okay. I think he almost started getting typecast, things like Ocean's films and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that kind of pretty boy sort of actiony kind of love interest sort of figure. And yeah, then I saw him in Burn After Reading, and it kind of changed my perception of him. And I mean, this for me sums up his ability.
Yeah, here's what I'll say. I don't think Brad Pitt, in terms of the films he's in, has ever been typecast, but with his media personality, particularly when he's high-profile relationship with Angelina Jolie, everyone was expecting something, and they point to those couple of films you mentioned. But he's always done really interesting films. You look at stuff like 12 Monkeys, you look at stuff like Seven, into his work with the Coen brothers, his work with Tarantino. And even recently, he's had incredible films. He obviously won an Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but he had a couple other great performances that year.
Yeah, I think this for me was just... It was... Not only was it a brilliant Brad Pitt performance, it was a brilliant performance full stop.
Yeah.
And in terms of him being one of your favourite characters, to a T, it's Shug through and through.
It's hilarious but dark, which is my kind of brand of humour I love. Alright, I'm going to rattle through some pre-production.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this film took ages to come together. Tarantino wrote the script like well over a decade before he made this, and he viewed it as his masterpiece, hence the final line of the film. Because he felt it was the best thing he ever wrote, he kept working on it to try and make it perfect, and he finally finished it in like 2002, but it was too long. And at that point there were other people making kind of World War II movies, so he instead moved on to make Kill Bill, which I love. He then came back to Inglourious Basterds, and he had to kind of trim it back, and he used Pulp Fiction as a guideline for how long the script should be. So he was aiming for that kind of length. So the original idea he had was kind of a Dirty Dozen style bunch of guys all on a mission, so it would just be that. But after Kill Bill, he kind of focused it on a group of soldiers who escape from their executions and embark on a mission to help the Allies. And he described them as sort of not your normal hero types. So that's kind of... There were bits of that worked in. You look at Stigler's character, and that's kind of closer to what we got. But then the production kept getting delayed. Wants to act in a Takeshi Miike film called Sukiyaki Western Django, which is a Japanese Western. It's the second time Takeshi Miike has been mentioned after my mate Ben picked it for one of his favourite film openings. And then after that to make the film Death Proof. But eventually he got round to making it. So the title is taken from a 1978 Italian war film, which is correctly spelt, by Enzo G. Castellari, who makes a cameo appearance in the film, which is just such a cool little Easter egg in there. Tarantino, hasn't wanted to explain the misspellings in the title beyond it being kind of a very Quentin Tarantino spelling. But he has said that the E in Bastards is kind of how it's said in the film. So he hasn't explained the U in Inglourious, the extra U in Inglourious, though. Going to rattle through some casting information. So Aldo Rain. Tarantino and Pitt had wanted to work together for ages, and they were just waiting for the right project. About halfway through kind of writing the script, Tarantino thought Pitt would be really good. And then he finished the script, and he's just like, you need Pitt for this. Like, he's the perfect guy. The Bastards in general, only 3 of the actors in that group are actually Jewish. Eli Roth, BJ Novak, and Sam Levine. They all had to do like training in handling German weapons, and there's just a great story that Sam Levine told in an interview once, where he's standing next to Pitt as they're doing this training, and he's got a box sitting there. Pitt's holding this gun, and he just asked Sam Levine what's in that box, and apparently Pitt just didn't realise he was referencing Seven.
You couldn't write it.
Yeah,
Can you imagine
exactly.
being that actor standing next to him and just like hearing him deliver a line from one of his classic films unintentionally.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. Michael Myers obviously has like a small role in this film. He was a big Tarantino fan, and his parents were both in the army. And this was his last live action performance until 2018. Nearly 10 years later, where he had a small role in Bohemian Rhapsody. And at last, we have to talk about Hans Lander. Christoph Waltz is like the star of this film in many ways. He's the one who just blew up after it. He became the first actor in Tarantino film to win an Oscar. Tarantino actually wanted Leonardo DiCaprio to play the role originally, and then he realised, no, we need a native German speaker. Like, this has to be a German speaker. And they were worried the film would be unplayable. The role was unplayable, and that when they finally found Christoph Waltz, and Tarantino said this in so many interviews, that he gave them the movie back. So like, they're internally indebted. And again, there's a great story of the first table read of the script. So whenever all the cast get round to read the script, and Tarantino tells everyone, if you're not going to give it 100% here, you can get off my set. Like, you go all out first performance. And obviously no one knew Christoph Waltz at this point. He was, came from a German cinema. He wasn't a well-known person at all. And he just gave this really quiet, really understated, apparently very creepy performance. And everyone just thought that's how Tarantino wants him to play the role. Cool. And then you get on set and you get this like big, over-the-top, intense, insane performance. And that was just Tarantino had told him at the table read, play it at like 5%. And then when we actually get to film the scenes, it's going to be so much more of an impact on the other actors.
That's amazing. I really love stories like that. I love hearing about the kind of behind the scenes method to the madness sort of stuff. And I mean, I think method to the madness is exactly the phrase you'd use when talking about Christoph Waltz and his performance in this film. It is, for me, it is one of the greatest performances in film.
I'd agree.
This is certainly one of my favourites. And yeah, there are a few others that come close. You kind of talk about performances that have a long-lasting impact on cinema very rarely. I think, the likes of Heath Ledger's Joker, and talking about the kind of the way that different actors kind of use different techniques and stuff. But this, for me, this performance wasn't about, and I know that you and I have had conversations before about method acting and the kind of how controversial it is as a kind of technique. But this, for me, it proves that you do not need method. to bring like a game-changing performance.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The fact that, he's at the table read and he's doing it like 5%, and that's when he shows up on the day, that's where he turns it on. It improves. You don't need to be in that character 100% of the time. You can just put it in when you need to.
Yeah, and oh my god, does he do that?
Yeah, well, let's get into the film. We'll go through kind of chapter by chapter, and chapter 1 is Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France, which is just the opening scene. Oh my god.
Yeah, this has come up briefly in conversation before. We obviously mentioned that we put out the question of people's favourite opening scenes. This came up several times, I think.
Yeah, it came up a couple of times.
This is one of my favourites as well. The best for me, having watching it back, the best thing about this is that from this point on, you do not know what Christoph Waltz's intentions are at any given point.
Yeah, I agree. I think by the end of the scene, it becomes apparent that he knows the Dreyfuses have been sheltered at this farm the entire time, and he's just playing with both the farmer and the Dreyfuses. He obviously goes through this whole rigmarole where he's really friendly and he's very complimentary about their milk. Even when he's like pulling out his pipe that's so much bigger than the farmer's. Everything is to mess with him.
I hate to say it, but he's almost likable.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's going for. He is there to mess with the people, because I get the feeling that for his character, he could just go in, kill the Dreyfuses, arrest the farmer, whatever, and that just wouldn't be fun for him. He gets a glee and an enjoyment out of this, and that's why he's such a terrifying character.
Yeah. And I think the fact that obviously there's this sadistic element to everything he does.
Yeah.
It's self-serving. It's like he gets gratification from it. It's not just a job. You see other Nazis in the film that they crap their pants when they're about to sacrifice themselves for the Aryan cause, and you question all the time. You're questioning kind of how committed some of these people are to the Nazi agenda, but this guy is somebody who, it's not even about that, it's just about how much pleasure he gets from it personally.
Oh yeah, like it makes sense that he rats them out at the end, because he was only using the Nazis as a way to basically get his kicks off torturing people mentally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that paired with this real uncertainty of, like, as I said, the best thing about this scene for me is the fact that for the rest of the film, you don't know what he's thinking. You don't know what he's trying to do. He's toying, but you don't know how. Yeah. And even when his character isn't doing it, there's this moment where you're at the table and Hans Lander comes in, and Shosanna is sitting at the table where they're having breakfast, the lunch, and he clearly doesn't recognize her.
Oh no, he 100% does.
Do you think?
He orders her a glass of milk.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that, but I was like, but this is the thing, you can't tell. So
this is the thing. I wrote in my notes. I wrote big question. Does he recognise her? And then he orders her the glass of milk. I'm like, oh god, yeah, of course. And like, he definitely does. And he's just toying with her in some way. He wants to see where this plays out.
Yeah, but this is the thing though. Like, up until that point, and you don't know. Like, this is like a recurring theme with his character, is that you don't know. Like, does he recognise her? Does he not? Is he kind of toying with... I mean, when you've got Aldo Rain trying to speak Italian, like...
It's my favourite thing.
Yeah, which is absolutely brilliant. Like, you can't tell. You literally cannot tell. Like, everything with him is just a game. And... You don't know where his head's at, and that for me is like, he sets it up perfectly at the beginning, because for the rest of the film, it's almost like it's coming off the back of that scene.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. He's playing a game. Everything he does is, a sadistic game where he's trying to exert his power. It's the kind of build-up where he's so friendly, and then when he needs to, he switches, and he's intimidating, and he's calling out exactly the details of what's happening. And then even then, he starts torturing the Dreyfuses. He pretends that he's leaving in the language that they can speak, so that they think they're safe. And it's just unnecessary, and it's just all to give him his kicks,
Yeah, I mean, this is for me, it's an iconic opening scene, an iconic scene, full stop.
Yeah.
And what an introduction to Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, guy had come from German cinema, wasn't known in English-speaking countries, Hollywood at all. And he introduced himself with this scene and this performance, and anyone who sees it just has to go, okay, wow, this guy is incredible.
Yeah, and I also like that it is really testament to actually how much talent and ability is living elsewhere. It's not just about westernized kind of Hollywood cinema.
A recent one, we just had the Oscars at the time of recording, and Yoon Young Jung, or I can't remember how to say her name, but she's a legendary Korean actress working for years there, and just hasn't been hugely well known in Western cinema at all. And she gets this chance in Minari, and immediately everyone goes, "Oh wow, this is the kind of caliber of actor out there."
Yeah. Talking about this right now is very current, like we were saying a couple of episodes ago that or last episode, that the fact that you're seeing more and more East Asian films competing for the main awards at Oscars and stuff is putting them into the limelight. And it is, not only is it kind of shining a light on East Asian cinema, but I think just highlighting the fact that there is so much ability in the rest of the world that is so kind of overlooked or just not even considered.
Absolutely.
People just aren't even aware of it. So yeah, I mean, what a service to international cinema. That was, fantastic opening scene.
Yeah, and then from there we go into chapter 2, and we're introduced to the Bastards, and Aldo Rain is getting up his men, his whole bit of, "I want my scalps, you will get me my 100 Nazi scalps." His delivery, his cadence is what makes it. I love his cadence of everything. That's, I think, a huge part of why I think it's, again, the stuff he's saying's horrific. They're talking each person's going to have to go and scalp 100 people. And that's horrible. But the way Pitt is delivering it in this weird cadence just makes it darkly funny. And then we kind of learn about how the Bastards are operating. They're there. They're there to kill the Nazis, and they leave one guy alive in each case. And they set up the whole. Are you gonna, when you finish the war, are you gonna take that uniform off? And that's something I can't abide because I want to be able to recognise the Nazis, and then engraving the swastika into the forehead. Which, again, horrific stuff. These are not good people. But they are, the protagonists of our film in many ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly a cause that we can get behind to some extent. I think what this film does so well is that it's just full of fantastic setups. We've spoken about the opening scene and the way that Christoph Waltz sets up his character. You look at this scene and you look at the way that there's a setup for basically every single one of the Bastards. You've got Aldo Rain, who is in his opening monologue is just a brilliant setup. And you talk about his cadence and his intonation, that builds his character immediately.
Yeah.
It's all about it feels like they've spent real time kind of figuring out the characters and building them from the get-go, to the point where, you know, even kind of Michael Fassbender's setup when he kind of walks into the office and you got like Churchill standing in the corner and stuff, and like that, the way that they present each character as they walk onto the screen, you know, it's so well done and so consistently done that it kind of carries them throughout the rest of the film. And I think that can quite often be overlooked in a film, is kind of how a character is set up and introduced, you know. And this film just goes from strength to strength every single chapter.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the kind of more peripheral bastards, you know, Sam Levine plays Hirschberg, and he kind of talks about, he did a lot of work in building the character, who he was, his motivations. He gets like one line and is briefly on screen a couple of other times. Like, a lot of his stuff was cut out, but every single one had to work on, you know, what is driving this character, what is motivating them, where have they come from. And, you know, it doesn't always make it on screen, but it means that, you know, when a character does get time, as, you know, all the ones you mentioned, you do understand them, and you do get that kind of introduction to them very strongly. The bastards we do get kind of really introduced to here are Hugo Stiglitz, who this is a little drop of Samuel L. Jackson narrates this, because it wouldn't be a Tarantino film without a bit of Sam Jackson.
Yeah, I did roll my eyes and laugh when I heard that voice.
Yeah. And Sergeant Donnie Donowitz, who's been dubbed the Bear Jew, who bashes in Nazi heads with a baseball bat. Originally this was meant to be Adam Sandler.
Okay. I mean, I think we've briefly discussed my thoughts on Adam Sandler.
I don't remember them, but I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, okay. Uniformly not a fan.
It would have just gone way too far in the comedic direction.
So here's the thing. I will say Adam Sandler's two best films to me are films where it's been directors with very strong voice and vision. If you've seen Punch Drunk Love or Uncut Gems, they are Paul Thomas Anderson and Safdie brothers films, and they're not Adam Sandler films. But we didn't get Adam Sandler. He was busy making Funny People, which is one of those terrible Adam Sandler films. And we got Eli Roth instead. I think he might still be the weakest part of the film.
Oh, really? How come?
It's very over the top. Like, it just doesn't gel. Like, his intro, where he's kind of comes out this very imposing, almost kind of stoic guy, you know, threatening with the baseball, and then he just goes off into this tirade, like this baseball tirade. It kind of doesn't quite work for me.
Okay.
I'm just not a huge fan of Eli Roth either.
Right, okay. I think towards the end, he feels more like part of the group. It does feel as though he's almost kind of like the spearhead. He's something a little different. He's kind of like their main weapon, which they bring out every now and then. He doesn't completely feel like a part of the Bastards. I can see that. His
sort of scenes where he's almost in the background, he's, you know, wordlessly kind of reacting to stuff. His character comes across like pretty psychopathic in his facial reactions. Like, he's just reveling in this stuff as much as Lander is.
I mean, as you said, like, the Bastards are not good people.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like the lesser of two evils.
Mm. And then chapter 3, we jump ahead 4 years. And this is German Night in Paris, and we are introduced to Shoshana 4 years later, running a cinema in Paris under the name Emmanuelle Mimu, and she is approached by a German Frederick Zoller, who just, you know, tries to talk to her about cinema, and, you know, essentially he's very clearly flirting with her. And this is honestly like some of the most interesting and almost like least on the nose stuff Tarantino has ever made. And it's kind of the moment where, you know, he asks what her name is, and she's like, "Oh, you want to see my papers?" It's stuff like this where it's not explicitly stated, but it's very obvious that there's a big power imbalance here. And however friendly Zola is in almost all of these scenes, there's never an equality of power. He's always got that kind of threat hanging over her. Another example is when he gets her to come to the lunch, and he says, "Oh, I didn't know if you'd accept my invitation," and she was forced into the car by Nazi officers. She wasn't given a choice. There was no way she could turn down his, in inverted commas, invitation. It was effectively a kidnapping. There's no equality in power here. It is very much, however much he wants to pretend that he can just be chatting her up, it's never that. It's always, this is someone who could in a second have me killed, and she can't do anything about it. She has to just kind of go along.
Do you think that he recognises that, or do you think that that's something that he's trying to deal with and work around?
See, I'm not sure on that. I think maybe he doesn't even realise that he has that kind of level of power and threat over someone else. It's just, he thinks that he clearly thinks he has some kind of right to do whatever he wants. Maybe that's because of his exploits as a war hero, which we'll get onto in a sec, or if it's just being a Nazi soldier. I don't know.
He comes across as quite naive. It doesn't seem malicious, and I think this is kind of one of the most sort of obnoxious things about this film, is that half of these Nazis are, if you took the Nazism away from it, you would argue that they're actually quite nice people, right? When they're in their comfort zone, when they're kind of socializing and stuff, they're not. It's not about wielding their power.
Well, isn't that just the case? They were soldiers fighting the war. It's like any soldier can be in an army that suddenly decides to carry out abhorrent things. And you're not going to get, most of them aren't going to turn around and say no.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, you do consistently come across characters and Nazi soldiers that don't seem as committed to the cause as somebody like Hitler. It's clearly not their campaign. It's something that they've been roped into. But then there's always this tug between, are they genuine people, or genuinely nice, kind people that have found themselves in a manipulated position, or do they actually, are their choices grounded in this hugely disgusting belief that Jewish people should be exterminated, and other groups of people, of course. But
for Zola in particular, I think that rug gets pulled out when he is at the cinema and he's trying to get in, and she flat out tells him no, and he just smashes the door down and finally starts saying, you should do what I say, I'm very important.
Yeah, I agree, but that's obviously throughout the film, that question is always simmering underneath.
That's where I think Tarantino is so good in this. This is why I think this is some of the most brilliant, subtle kind of writing Tarantino's done, is that for most of the film, it's an implication that that's there. He doesn't actually have to exert that. And I think he's kind of coasting off that implication of threat rather than actually using it and able to appear nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite harrowing. And that's why those moments where Shosanna and Hans are sitting at the table, that's why that's so kind of stomach churning. And that's why you have those kind of, there are just these moments sprinkled throughout the film where, you think that somebody's got away with something, or you think that, there's the whole bit in the underground bar,
We'll get to that.
I'm sure we'll get onto. Yeah, but that whole scene
Yeah.
is exactly that, and that's why it's so tense, and that's why you feel so on edge, and just I mean, the fact that this film it's so rooted in that question that you're almost sitting uncomfortably for the whole thing.
Yeah, well, screw it, let's get into that. Chapter 4 is Operation Kino, which is this operation to destroy the premiere of this propaganda film, Nation's Pride. And we meet Lieutenant Archie Heacox, played by Michael Fassbender. Originally, again, this is another one that was a different actor who was busy. Simon Pegg. I can't see it. I can't see it at all.
I can't see it.
No.
He doesn't have that kind of classic British, well-to-do.
Yeah, I also
striking.
Don't know how his German is.
Yeah, and that. I mean, I'm not too well versed on how Michael Fassbender's is. I don't know if he did that for the film or.
No, he is a native German speaker.
Oh, is he?
Yes, I believe he is of German descent, Irish and German. Yeah, he was born in Heidelberg.
Okay, cool. Well then, there we go. So it was a good casting.
Yeah. He was he wasn't a big name at this point at all. I think he'd been in 300, but his breakthrough came with Shame and X-Men, which were a couple of years later. He was probably actually only on the radar for this because he auditioned to play Hans Lander.
Ah, okay.
And that's probably where kind of they knew about him from. So just to finish up, Simon Pegg was busy filming Steven Spielberg's Tintin. So, one of those had a longer lasting cultural impact.
Yeah.
So we get into this kind of rendezvous with their double agent, which is German actress Bridget von Hammersmark, who is fighting in a basement again. Who is meeting them in a basement bar, and there's this whole brilliant Brad Pitt bit where he's like, the problems with fighting in a basement. Number one, you're fighting in a basement. So funny. And as you say, this whole scene is a masterpiece in building tension. So it starts immediately, they walk in and there's a bunch of Nazis that are not meant to be there. It was meant to, they picked a remote location to be away. Okay, fine. These guys are drunk, having a drinking game. They're all quite chilled. And it slowly builds, and it keeps offering these, are they getting found out? No, they found their way out of it. Are they getting found out? No, they found their way out of it. But it's this slow escalation that just makes it so intense. And so you've got the first part is the Germans are celebrating because one of the soldiers has just had a baby, and he comes over to ask for an autograph, and eventually they kind of get frustrated with him, snap at him, and he starts then asking, what's your weird accent to Fassbender's character? And they get out of that, they shout him down, you can't talk to a superior officer like that. And then a Gestapo officer who's been sitting in a corner shows up. And he starts grilling them about the accents. And he immediately is picking out everyone else's accent. And they talk their way out of that. And there's this whole bit about Fassbender saying his family were in some one scene of a film in their home village. It's very, very Tarantino. And then they build another question. They start playing this game where there's a guessing game, and we learn that Stiglitz, who's one of the German speaking officers, was tortured by this Gestapo officer, so he's very on edge. And then there's he says, shall we play another round? And Michael Fassbender's character's like, no, you're kind of intruding. And he goes on this very intense, I'm only intruding if the Fraulein says I'm intruding. And then it's oh, what's going to happen here? It's again, a kind of a standoff moment. And then he cuts the tension. Of course I'm intruding. That was a joke.
Yeah. I think one of the best bits of this scene is obviously when they do get found out, and time again it offers these chances for them to to get seen, and you kind of go, oh, it could be this, no, it's not. It could be that, oh, no, it's not. And then when they do get found out, you don't know what it is.
It's something minor.
And also, because it's such a kind of culturally specific reason that you're sitting there going, I know they've been found out, but I don't know why. So even when they do get found out, you're still sitting there kind of like, what's going on? And you know that it's happened. There's that moment where, you see the gesture, you see his eyes clock it, you see it go through his head, but you don't understand. And so it's just that brilliant way of keeping you holding you there just a little longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really you don't actually find out until later on when it's explained.
Yeah, it's afterwards.
Yeah, and so actually that's why I think that this scene is one of and there's so many, but one of the best written scenes in the film. Because
I think this probably my favourite scene in the film.
Yeah, like at this point, Tarantino has just played with the audience. Like it's like we're putty in his hands.
Yeah,
he's just shaping the scene, and we're just going along with it, and you don't know where it's going.
But also the fact, like you mentioned, we don't know what they've been found out, but he still conveys that it has been found out. Brilliant performance from the Gestapo officer, and just like kind of you can sense in everyone like something's off here, and it's just there's suddenly more than just a tension in the film. There's a tension in the world of the film as well now, and everyone's really on edge.
Yeah.
And then in the most Tarantino way ever, there's suddenly a mad explosion of violence, which leaves virtually everyone dead. Including the great line, "Say goodbye to your Nazi balls," as Stiglitz just shoots him in the groin.
Yeah. I mean, this film, it's this scene, it sums up the film.
Yeah.
It's everything that happens in the first scene. It's everything that happens in the cinema. It's everything that Lieutenant Aldo Rain is. Like, it's just, it embodies everything that you kind of see along the way. And for me, this is possibly one of, if not the best written scene in the whole film.
Yeah, I adore it. It's superb. And then afterwards, it only leaves Wilhelm and Bridget von Hammersmark alive. There's a bit of a Mexican standoff, and eventually von Hammersmark shoots Wilhelm, and the rest of the bastards get her out, and they go to a vet to force him to do some emergency sort of surgery on her, get the bullet out of her leg, and they kind of realise the plan's a bit wrecked because none of them speak German. So they realise, okay, we can kind of get away with speaking some terrible Italian. This is the whole line where, he says, when Brad Pitt's Aldo Rain says, "I speak the most Italian," and he phrases it, "Italian," It's again, the cadence of the way he says, not only the accent, but the cadence of where he puts the emphasis in the word is very funny. "I speak the most Italian," Danowitz speaks the second most, and Omar speaks the third most. And then Omar goes, "I don't speak any Italian." Yeah. Like I said, third best.
Yeah. From this point on, it just feels rickety for them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And, what's so good is that, like, obviously it ends up becoming a suicide mission. Like, it's almost like an admission of near defeat. Like, they're like, right, well, all we can do is just blow this thing up from the inside. And I love the fact that this whole plan ends up pivoting on Christoph Waltz.
Well, he clocks like exactly what the plan is, because he investigates this bar, and he finds Bridget's shoes and the napkin that she signs to Wilhelm, and he also recognises both the dead bastards in there. So he kind of, in his head, he's worked out, Bridget von Hammersmark's working with the bastards. Like, he got there already. So this is one of the times that that he knows already. Like, as soon as that scene starts, in the final chapter, but you don't know what his end game is, because suddenly his motivations have changed.
There's this brilliant moment where in the theatre, and just this moment of absolute madness where he cracks up and he just is like hysterically laughing
in his head, because he knows it's rubbish, and he's like, this is the dumbest excuse I've ever heard.
Yeah, but even that, like, you understand that he's genuinely laughing because of that, but you're also questioning, like, is this just another tactic? Like, everything, this is what I mean. Like, even when there are moments of like genuine emotion, you never know if it is genuine. Like,
he's toying with them for sure.
Oh yeah, but he's just, the character is so ambiguous in everything that he does, even though obviously it's self-centered, but his kind of drive is so obvious.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real skill to go, okay, you know what my objective is, you know what I'm trying to do, but you don't know how I'm doing it. And that is, that's something that carries this film for me.
I do want to say, before we kind of get deeper into this chapter, which is chapter 5, Revenge of the Giant Face, it opens with some incredible little moments. So the whole kind of sequence of Shoshana preparing the theatre, and it ends with this amazing top-down shot as she walks through into the foyer. It's just stunning. Like, that's so good. And even when we're in the foyer and we're kind of following slightly different people, there's a couple of really great kind of long one-shots in there as people move around. And, you know, there's one where she's going off and meeting up with Zola, and there's one where Landa meets up with Bridget and the Bastards. It's like, this is where Tarantino's like full out showing his directorial flair.
Yeah, I think he's always had a great thing for shot composition.
Yeah.
Like, you can see that in films like Kill Bill, you know, where he shows his kind of eye for cinema. And this is, there are a couple of interesting choices throughout the film. There's quite a lot of point of view shots and things done better than Mystery Men. And I think, and it's quite interesting how, like, you'll always see through Tarantino's films, like, they're not very conventionally stitched together. You know, you've got Kill Bill, which is kind of intertwined with this sort of comic book storytelling. You've got, like, in this film, it's got the kind of the chapters in it. You know, none of his films really feel particularly linear.
Oh no, he definitely goes for non-linear vibes in his films.
Yeah, and so when there's kind of a real emphasis on the sort of cinematic techniques and the shot composition and stuff that is used within that story, it's almost like it's almost like creating a pop-up book. Like, there are just these moments that kind of stand out of this sort of really what feels a little disjointed.
I mean, this is why, like, I know it's a very well-made film. It's a very good film. Of like Tarantino's like well-regarded, heralded films, Django Unchained is my least favourite because it just feels the most conventional. Like, it feels the one he's playing the safest in.
Yeah, I really like Django Unchained.
I think it's a perfectly good film.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not saying that you don't like it.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, but I don't know whether that's because, you know, I like certain moments in it, or I like the general storyline, or what. But I think it's just really kind of, it just brings a whole different dimension to the films when he suddenly kind of brings out this grand sort of, these grand cinematic techniques. Yeah. Especially because he doesn't work conventionally. So to bring something that you would expect to see a little more commonly in kind of more conventional films is quite refreshing in the context of his films.
Yeah. I want to go back to Landa torturing the bastards when he's introduced them all, and then he just starts speaking in perfect fluent Italian,
Yeah.
and they all just look completely confused, and Brad Pitt's
Yeah.
just trying to play it off as if he knows what's going on.
Yeah, and when he's trying to get Brad Pitt to repeat his name,
Gorlami.
Like, it's
I love the little detail of Omar kind of nailing his, despite not speaking Italian.
Yeah, I mean, this whole scene is just like, it's almost like the game. The audience becomes part of the game here.
Yeah,
like this is something that I find differentiates this scene to other scenes that Hans is in, is that everything that Hans Landa does up until this point, you're kind of watching him do to somebody else, whereas at this point you're kind of invited in to enjoy it with him. So you're kind of, because the tension is not quite the same. So you've got the opening scene, you've got the scene at lunch with Shosanna. Like, there's these moments which feel really sinister, and really really tense. But with this, there's more comedy involved in this. So you're sort of asked to sit down and relax a little with this one, and you're also kind of invited in to join in and appreciate the comedy behind these three bastards.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we've been saying, is in those other ones, you don't know at the start what Landa knows and doesn't. Whereas in this one, you come into it knowing Landa knows that these guys are not on his side. Like, they're not Nazis. Or they're not, they're there to cause trouble. He knows who they are and he knows what's up. And knowing it, so there's no need to build tension for the audience. So you can just have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really valid point, that you're entering into this scene from a different perspective as well.
Yeah, and then he just allows Donowitz and Omar to go take their seats, and you go, wait a minute, what? Why is he doing that? And you also see at this point learn that they've got dynamite strapped to their legs.
I think what's really great about that moment as well is that, because you've been kind of lulled into that false sense of security where you think you know what he's doing, you know where he's coming from, you know the position he's already in, and then suddenly he makes a decision that you don't expect from him, and it just kind of undercuts the whole vibe. And you're like, and just at the point where you think you know what he's doing, and you think you understand his motives and his method, it's kind of flipped on its head and inverted, and suddenly you don't know what he's doing.
And then he takes Bridget aside and he torments her a bit, reveals the shoe from the bar, at which point she knows that the jig is up, and he strangles her to death. There is some kind of slightly questionable behind the scenes moments here where Tarantino was like saying that her performance in getting strangled wasn't real enough, so the shot where you just see her face and hands, I think that's Tarantino actually strangling her, which not good set practice at all. There's always been these kind of question marks about Tarantino where it's very much the film comes before anyone's well-being in his head.
Yeah, I've heard about this, and I absolutely can't condone that practice.
No, not at all.
I think, that's abuse.
Yeah,
like, it, quite simply put.
And it goes back to older directors like Hitchcock or Kubrick, who kind of had very similar, we'll do whatever it takes to make this film as perfect as possible, and there are lines that do get crossed and they shouldn't be, and as good as the films are, you can't condone that, and we do need to kind of get that stuff cut out of cinema.
Yeah, I not at all. Like, that's never acceptable, no matter how good the film becomes. I think this also kind of brings into question other questionable acting and film practices. Obviously, we know about the sort of sexual exploitation of women, especially in regard to Harvey Weinstein, on film as well. There's kind of really, I think there's a story about Selma Hayek and Frida, and with Weinstein and stuff. And although there's not necessarily a causal link, we know that Weinstein and Tarantino were at a time quite close, which, while Tarantino might not in any way be involved or condone what Weinstein did, I think it says a bit about the generation of film production they belong to.
I will also say I think Tarantino comes from a very different place. It's not a place of power as much, which, I think a lot of those kind of Weinstein stuff and the recent kind of Joss Whedon allegations come from a place of wanting power. His comes from a place of, this film is more important than anyone working on it, which obviously is still a terrible thing, but it is, I think, from a different kind of place.
I don't think you're wrong. I think, though, it does imply a certain approach to filmmaking, where actually there's just kind of a lack of consideration for the people that are working on it.
I agree.
And also, I mean, you look at, I mean, we've spoken about method acting and stuff, and that's in a sense a similar approach, whereby the health and well-being of you or people around you that you're interacting with is less important than what you produce on screen.
And absolutely.
It does call into question the eligibility of those kind of approaches to filmmaking, which, I mean, I think are quite plain anyway. I think quite obvious.
Yeah.
And you could get into the technicalities and you get into conversations about things like method acting for hours, but it does feel part and parcel,
It's part of the same conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, I had heard that story.
So that's kind of the serious part of the podcast where we have to talk about that. And there's a little bit more to talk about later as well, of more kind of cultural things. But we'll just finish off talking about the film for now. And Hans Lander's kind of interactions with Aldo Raine. So this is the first time like our two kind of major characters have become face to face. And I think this is where you see just what a good Brad Pitt performance this is. Because obviously Christoph Waltz has been stealing this film and just this whirlwind of acting talent and charisma that's drawing you in every time. And Brad Pitt absolutely goes toe to toe with him in this scene.
Absolutely. I mean, I say that, I've said that this is possibly one of the great film performances from Christoph Waltz, but there's a reason why it's also one of Brad Pitt's best performances.
Yeah.
He does not look like he's trying to play up to Christoph Waltz in any sort of way. He matches him in this scene, and this is why, for me, it's one of the best Tarantino films, if not the best.
Yeah.
One of. I think my other favourite.
It's my favourite.
Yeah, I mean, this for me is definitely, a bunker film or like a desert island film.
Yeah.
I could watch it time and time again, and that is in part testament to the cast.
Yeah. And we get into the scene, and Lander kind of reveals where he's coming from. He reveals he's hidden that Brad Pitt, Aldo Raine's dynamite in Hitler and Goebbels' box to ensure that they perish in what happens. He's sitting on the information of Donowitz and Omar being in there, and he's willing to keep sitting on that information as long as his demands are met. And his demands are, he wants it to be noted that he was part of Operation Kino, a double agent. His crimes will be ignored. He wants a Congressional Medal of Honor. And it's just, again, this kind of sinister friendliness where he says, I want everyone involved to get a Congressional Medal of Honor. And he wants US citizenship and land on Nantucket Island.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, again, there's this playfulness throughout. It's still a game to him.
Yeah.
Even though he's being transparent with what he wants, where he's coming from, it's still a tactical move. Like, he's still playing with them. Even to the point where, like, he's genuinely getting childish about it. Like, the whole, it's a bingo. Like, whole section of this scene, it's, you know, up until now, it's all kind of been, and you see elements of it kind of when he's laughing at von Hammersmark, but this is the point where, like, you see him really kind of fall into his own. He really sort of settles into the game that he's playing.
Well, for his mind, this is the winning move. With this and them agreeing the deal, he wins. And we'll quickly come back to the outcome of that, but we need to go back into the cinema for Nation's Pride, which is the propaganda film premiere. And this little film was actually directed by Eli Roth, who plays Donowitz. It's about 5.5 minutes long, the actual thing he directed, and it's obviously it's designed to feel like pieces of a larger film rather than a full experience. And Shoshana and her assistant Marcel are also getting their plan in action, which is he seals up the auditorium and then lights up this big stack of 35mm nitrate film, which is obviously incredibly flammable. And the fact that that's like the thing that they set fire is such like a Tarantino film nerd thing to know and add into the film. So there's this kind of two-pronged attack on the Nazis, and Donowitz and Omar burst into the box at the top to and start just firing guns. And again, Donowitz has this kind of intense, murderous look on his face until the explosive goes off and kills them all.
Yeah, I mean, there's that kind of moment where you see him shooting Hitler.
Yeah.
In the head, and it's like watching a Barbie doll melting. Like, it's pretty ruthless. And it's almost like this crescendo up to the explosion. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I love about this scene is that there's still those moments of comedy, just like interjected into this tension, like the bit where they've got the bombs on their ankle and they're trying to squeeze up the aisle. They've literally got dynamite strapped to their ankle. One wrong move and who knows what can happen. It feels pretty heroic on their part.
I think the heroism kind of leaves at that point. It becomes like shooting fish in a barrel. It loses its heroism there, and again, the look on his face is not a particularly heroic picture of someone. And then we get kind of the final move in the game. So Lander drives Rain and Utovich along with his radio operator over into Allied territory, and they surrender themselves. At which point Aldo Rain shoots his Lander's radio operator, and he redoes the whole bit we heard earlier about, I imagine when the war's over you're going to take off that uniform. At which point Lander knows exactly what's up. And this is the first time he's been completely caught unaware, and that he's now on the receiving end, and he suddenly realises, I haven't won.
Yeah. This is the first time you see him lose control.
Yes.
And you see him genuinely scared.
Oh, yeah, he's terrified.
Yeah. And what I think is so brilliant about this is that, I mean, the moment where they're kind of performing this procedure on his forehead, there's just that really shrill scream. And it's almost like it's topped off by that moment where he almost becomes like the animal that he treated other people like. Like, it sounded like a pig being slaughtered, and it just, for me, it kind of really emphasized how suddenly the shoe was on the other foot.
Yeah. And it ends with Brad Pitt looking at this, it's again that kind of point of view angle from Lander's point of view, and looking up at them, and Brad Pitt delivering the line, "You know, Yutovich, I think this might just be my masterpiece," which is clearly Tarantino talking about his own film.
Yeah, yeah.
The film came out in August 2009, very successfully financially. At the time, it was Tarantino's highest-grossing film. Django then passed that. It opened to generally very positive reviews, but there were a few dissenting voices. And there was particularly some criticism from Jewish press outlets. One critic said the film lacks any kind of moral depth, serving more as an alternative to reality where violence solves everything. Another was against kind of the revisionist history and it making Jews into violent perpetrators, which is definitely something I understand. The most negative of the reviews was apparently incredibly bored by the film and found himself thinking that the film seems morally akin to Holocaust denial, even though it proudly claims to be the opposite of that. There has been some dissenting voices from Jewish press out there, so I think that is something that's worth considering. You know, Tarantino obviously not a Jewish person, and there was a few Jewish people involved in the cast. We mentioned a few of the Bastards earlier, so it's an interesting kind of... obviously, as a non-Jewish person myself, I'm not the person to talk about this, so I'd go listen to Jewish voices on this one. It did feature, the film did feature on a lot of critics' best of the year list and has featured on a number of kind of best films since 2000s list. It was highly successful at awards season. Right from its release, Christopher Waltz won Best Actor at Cannes. It was nominated for 8 different Oscars, including Best Picture. It only won Best Actor for Christoph Waltz, who was the only acting winner for a Tarantino film. He won again for Django, until Brad Pitt won for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It did lose Best Picture to The Hurt Locker, which is also a terrific film, exploring war from a very different angle. Yeah, that's kind of all I've got to say on the film. I've said this is my favourite Tarantino film. I think, Landa is one of the great movie villains. It's one of the great movie performances, as we've said. I adore Aldo Rain. He is a hilarious and yet layered character. And that's why I had to pick this film for my one of my picks.
I've noticed all 3 of your picks so far, and I said this last episode, or your last pick as well. All of your 3 picks so far have been characters who have enjoyed fighting against the Nazis.
That might change.
There's
that might
theme.
Change.
It's a fantastic film. Like I said, it's definitely one that I would take with me to a desert island. The variation of character and story, and there's just so many strong points to this film. Every single time you watch it, you can almost enjoy a different thing about it. Entirely. There are times where you can just delve into and enjoy the brilliant acting, and then there are times where you can go, actually, bloody hell, this film is really well put together. It's something that it feels just like one of the most rounded films.
Completely agree.
And that's what makes it such a strong movie.
Yeah. That's going to be it for Inglourious Basterds. It's your pick next week, and what are you going for?
So I'm going to go for a film that I haven't seen in years. And I remember watching it at a family friend's when I was younger, and I watched it several times, and it is Stand By Me, the 1986 film Stand By Me.
Wow, you know what? I never expected Stand By Me to come out from you in this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It is a film that I really want to watch again because I haven't seen for so many years. I remember thinking it was brilliant when I was younger, and I want to revisit it. One of those films that I know so much about. Stand By Me, it is referenced so often that I feel like I know a lot of references. I don't think I've ever actually seen it. Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like it's just one of those where I feel like you know all about the film because it's so culturally impactful, but then I don't think I've ever actually watched it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to see it again. And for me to recognise what a film it was, and then to kind of grow up hearing about how good it was. I mean, at such a young age to to see that it was a brilliant film.
That is a fascinating and
then-
awesome pick. I can't wait.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, it was on my list. It was kind of a recent. It was one of those ones that I was like, oh my god, yeah, I remember watching that film, and just got the urge to put it on my list. And I thought I'd go with something that is not too stupid. I mean, I was saying before recording, I've chosen Monsters Inc. and Mystery Men. I think I might go for something a little more.
And as I pointed out then, Monsters Inc. emotionally destroyed us both.
Yeah, still recovering. Yeah. So yeah, so Stand By Me is my
fantastic. And I'll really brief close. I had one I was going to talk about a bit more detail, but we'll probably do that next time. I'll throw out a quick TV show recommendation. I just watched on Netflix. There's a new fantasy series called Shadow and Bone.
Okay.
Me and my mate Michael, we have a great love of watching terrible trash fantasy shows, and this is surprisingly less trash. I think the main story's like relatively generic and solid, but there is a kind of a series of, they're not supporting, like, their main cast members. This group of like criminals called the Crows, and they are awesome, and every scene with them is fantastic. And I know they have like spin-off books from the book series, but yeah, it's a cool kind of fantasy show set in the world where it's kind of a mixture of like inspired by Russian Empire and a couple of other like new non-traditional fantasy settings, which are obviously quite medieval Europe, medieval Western Europe. And in this case, it takes on kind of a more interesting inspiration, and then there's a whole kind of subsection of the population that has some kind of special powers, and yeah, it's pretty interesting, and I definitely recommend giving that a watch.
Cool, thank you. I will do. Not sure if I've been watching too many series recently. I've got back into my housemate and I have started watching Black Mirror again.
I dropped off it after Bandersnatch, to be honest, because that was just not good.
Yeah, Bandersnatch was, I feel, could have been better given what it was.
I think the problem with making something that has like your choose your own adventure is you need to make sure that every single choice you make leads to a satisfying outcome and story. And by all accounts, there was one good story in there and a lot of terrible ones.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately what the way that I saw Bandersnatch was that it was more an exploration of free choice and actually how free is it. You were kind of given the impression that you could choose the way the story went, but actually you didn't get that choice, you didn't get that freedom. And so when I think just because it was obviously Black Mirror, and having watched all the previous episodes and stuff, it was kind of, maybe I approached it from a more sort of alternative or dystopian perspective. But yeah, I kind of saw it as a question of how free is the choice that you have really, because it's always kind of influenced by outside factors.
Fair enough. For me, it just proved that choose your own adventure storytelling isn't there unless you put in a hell of a lot more than they did. Like, you need every single story strand to work narratively and be satisfying, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be limited, isn't it? Especially if you're putting it on such a global platform like Netflix. It's not, if it's going to be kind of accessible and tailored to, everyone, then it's never going to be, it's never going to have the same sort of impact or intricacy. So, but it is the weakest of. I mean, I personally think that the Black Mirror franchise went downhill after Charlie Brooker had after he sort of passed over autonomy to Netflix. I think when he was
still the man running it at Netflix. Like, he just got more freedom of, I don't need to make stuff this length. And I think actually some of their best episodes came after they went to Netflix.
And do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look things like I'm gonna blank on the names. I'm getting up Black Mirror episode list now because I need to know the names.
Describe it.
I'm getting up the names. Yeah, I mean, if you look at things like San Junipero, which is incredible,
Yes.
the USS Callister, which is like heartbreaking, Hang the DJ again, I really like, something like Shut Up and Dance, which is horrible. There are a lot of great episodes since I went on Netflix. Nosedive, which for me is the most horrific, in a big candy bubblegum wrapper. Yeah, it's I think there have been some great episodes, and I think he took the freedom of not needing to hit this is your time constraint.
Okay. I take your point.
I just think the last few have not been great. So the Bandersnatch and then the seasons after I haven't been a huge fan of.
Yeah, I did enjoy the episode with Anthony Mackie in it. That is, yeah, I think that was a strong episode.
Fair enough.
And that felt a little more like the older episodes pre-Bandersnatch.
Fair enough. All right, and so yeah, there's a couple of recommendations. You can get back into Black Mirror or Shadow and Bone, which is a pretty cool show. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and YouTube. You can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me everywhere at Shuggie Says and occasionally on Twitch at Shuggie Plays.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, Nyerrees, or on Instagram at Reese9.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.